And there you have Bob Schieffer concluding the third and final debate. The debates are over. 2 weeks to the day before Americans finally go to the polls, cast their final votes for the presidency. It was a foreign policy debate with a few detours, George, into education and the economy along the way. We will watch the candidates there and watch their families come up on stage and greet them. And it seemed to me the president came ready to be tough on Governor Romney, talking about a commander-in-chief having to be clear, saying that Governor Romney had sent mixed messages all over the map. And in response, Governor Romney said, attacking me is not an agenda.
Very clear, Diane, that President Obama made a vow to himself 3 weeks ago after that first debate that he was not going to let that happen to him again. He was the aggressor last week. He was the aggressor tonight from the very first question to Governor Romney and then President Obama. He wanted to paint a portrait of Governor Romney as an unsteady leader who shifted his positions and had policies of the past. This litany: foreign policy of the 1980s, social policy of the 1950s, economic policies of the 1920s. Very different strategy from Governor Romney tonight. Almost like a man who believed he came into this with a lead and momentum, hugging the president on many foreign policy issues tonight, taking a pass on the first question about Libya, decided not to attack. Again, what both men wanted to do tonight is pivot back to the economy. That is their core message. That is the issue they each believe they can win on.
All right, I want to turn to Matthew Dowd, because in the first debate, he said Governor Romney won. Second one, he said President Obama had nosed it. And is there a tiebreaker? Matt Dowd, who has advised presidential campaigns for 2 decades.
Well, 3 prize fights, same opponents. As you said, knockout on the first one by Mitt Romney, 1 on points on the second one by the president. The president won tonight, and here's why. I think they both came in with different agendas, but I think the president's agenda was actually judged, more, in my view, more successful in this. I think the president saw this as a commander-in-chief's test, who's more strong and decisive in this, and I think it was clear that he came through this debate much more strong, much more decisive, and much more of a commander-in-chief. Mitt Romney's goal was to come across as a much more moderate, I'm not going to, declare war on everybody in the world. You can trust me. You can see me as commander-in-chief, in a much more sympathetic way, or more diplomatic way, interestingly enough. I think he did that well, but for the commander-in-chief strong leader, which is where Mitt Romney gained in that first debate, as George said, where he won big in that, he actually lost that strong leader tonight to the president. So by points, I don't think it changes the race much. It's still a 1 or 2 point race, but he won.
So, George, Will, do you agree with that? Did Governor Romney have the wrong strategy tonight?
Well, I don't think so. The fact, George, that this debate occurred in the immediate aftermath of the death of George McGovern underscores a remarkable reversal in presidential politics for both parties. That is, 40 years ago tonight, George McGovern was running on the slogan, "Come Home, America." He then lost 49 states. 40 years on, "Come Home, America" is probably pretty much the foreign policy of an American plurality and perhaps an American majority, as the president seemed to understand, as he repeatedly, 3 times by my count, said we have to get back to nation building here at home. And when Mitt Romney was challenged to take a more assertive and engaged and interventionist foreign policy with regard, say, to Syria, in providing heavy weapons for the Syrian resistance, he did not indicate that he would have that done by American troops. And when he was challenged about having a no-fly zone, he seemed to pull back from that. So it does seem to me that in this debate, where 35 minutes in, they were talking about Medicaid reforms in Arizona and Rhode Island and class sizes all over America, they understand, both of them, that foreign policy is fairly peripheral to Americans' interests today, and what foreign policy they want means a lot less American involvement overseas.
And Nicolle Wallace, it was very clear, of course, you worked for Sarah Palin 4 years ago, President George W. Bush as well. Very clear from the very beginning of this debate, to pick up on what George Will is saying right there, that Governor Romney also reaching out directly to women voters who could make up the majority of the audience tonight.
Well, that's right. And what was so interesting is from the very beginning, this was a defense of the George W. Bush freedom agenda by President Obama and a loud and eager agreement from Mitt Romney that there wasn't a debate on foreign policy. But the debate on the economy seemed to take President Obama by surprise. Once he caught on, by 10:15, he was droning on about tires. So the surest sign to me that this was a win by the Romney campaign standard was that they pulled Obama in to a debate about the economy, which they feel like is their strong suit.
Donna Brazile, advisor to Democratic campaigns. Respond to that.
Well, first of all, Mitt Romney couldn't talk about foreign policy because he hasn't been there and he hasn't traveled enough to understand what's going on. I thought President Obama was strong. He was clear. He knows the threats. He's dealt with the threats. And what Mitt Romney did tonight was say, you know what, I agree with you. I agree with you on Afghanistan. There's no difference. I agree with you on Syria. There's no difference. And even on Iran, an area where Mitt Romney has talked about doing something more. Tonight, he said, I'll pretty much do what the president has done.
Now, Jake Tapper, you're in the spin rooms tonight. I know that the Romney campaign were out in force first, but what are you hearing from the White House right now?
The White House says that they feel very confident about the president's performance. As you noted, George, they feel like Mitt Romney this evening was trying to hug the president when it came to embracing some of his positions. You did not hear a lot of difference in terms of what Mitt Romney would do differently with regards to Iran or Syria or some of the other countries. The campaign manager for the Obama campaign, Jim Messina, emailed me when I asked him what he thought. He said completely dominant. He thought President Obama really was very aggressive, which served him well. I do think it's important to note that Mitt Romney, of course, came into the night with a different agenda to talk about the economy, not necessarily foreign policy as much, and he probably scored some points there. But generally speaking, on the foreign policy debate, the Obama campaign feels very, very good tonight.
And hearing all the Romney side spin is David Muir, who covers the Romney campaign. David.
Hey there, Diane. Another objective for Mitt Romney tonight was to come in and try not to stand in the way of the momentum he's seen, in particular from that first debate. The Romney campaign believes that he didn't do anything tonight that would get in the way of that momentum, saying the governor conducted himself in ways that show that he was in command, that he was thoughtful. In fact, they make the argument that the president looked like he was on the defensive tonight. But if you tuned in tonight for distinctions on foreign policy, when it came to Syria, you heard Governor Romney say, I don't want military in Syria. When it comes to Iran, he said military action should be a last resort. So again, these are policies that sound an awful lot like one another. And I was struck by, just seconds into this debate, we were hearing Governor Romney bring up Osama bin Laden first. We had a suspicion that he would do that, an overture to the president indicating that Governor Romney thought that that was a decision that was well made in this administration. Diane.
David Muir, thanks. I want to go to our global affairs anchor, Christian Amanpour. You've been checking with foreign policy experts through the evening. We heard from everybody else here. It seemed like there wasn't all that much of a debate on many of these key foreign policy issues. Is that what the experts heard as well?
Well, yes. I mean, look, as we've just enumerated, on all the big issues, whether it be Syria, Iran, Afghanistan, Libya, they barely even talked about, there doesn't seem to be a huge difference. I think that what's really interesting that Bob Schieffer tried to ask President Obama, what would the shape of a deal be if you did have one-on-one talks with Iran? The president just said, it's not going to happen. We're not having those talks. Didn't even push Mitt Romney on whether they would do that. And they both sort of fell in line. Mitt Romney sort of said, well, you know, I'd be tougher on the sanctions and I would indict President Ahmadinejad for genocide incitement. I think a lot of people, certainly out in the world, and by the way, some of these foreign leaders want to know what the United States might do about Syria, because I've spoken to many of them who say if the U.S. led, we would be tougher in Syria. You know, you can't go around saying Assad's days are numbered and then just let the slaughter continue. So I think a no-fly zone is something many in the region thought would happen, but even Mitt Romney said no.
And turning next to our senior foreign affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz. Martha, you were sitting at that very table, the same table, moderating the vice president's debate. So what did you see?
Well, I think what I didn't see was a foreign policy debate, really. We turned so quickly to the economy. We turned so quickly to domestic issues. And the other thing that really surprised me is I didn't hear the term from Mitt Romney, peace through strength, a single time there. He was a different candidate in terms of the way he would approach foreign policy. But one thing I did notice with President Obama, look, not everybody looks at it like Christiane and I do, and they're going to all these little policy wonk things. President Obama humanized what he was talking about. He talked a lot about the troops. He talked about the survivors from 9/11. He talked about the people in Israel. So if in fact he was going towards the female vote, he probably got their attention with that sort of approach.
And let's go straight to our senior political correspondent, John Carl. John, what surprised you the most tonight?
Well, look, what top Romney advisor going into this said that our goal is simply not to screw up. So it didn't surprise me on one hand that he really embraced in many ways the Obama foreign policy agenda, didn't pick big fights. But what surprised me, George, was the degree to which Mitt Romney sounded a little bit like a peacenik. You know, George mentioned George McGovern. There was a little George McGovern coming out of him, like when he said, we cannot kill our way out of this mess, or he said, our goal is to make the world more peaceful. That was a very different tone from Mitt Romney than the Mitt Romney I covered during the primary.
That's right. He also said we don't want another Iraq or Afghanistan, no military in Syria. And you're also manning the fact check desk. Any glaring misstatements by either candidate?
Well, there were a couple. One was when Mitt Romney repeated what he said before, that the president went on an apology tour when he became president. We've looked at all those speeches and those first foreign trips. The president didn't apologize for America. He did acknowledge some mistakes that the United States had made, but there's no way you could really call it an apology tour. And then there was one from the president when he said that Mitt Romney just a few weeks ago said he wanted 20,000 troops back in Iraq. That is not true in any way. Back many months ago, Mitt Romney said it was unfortunate that we didn't negotiate an agreement with the Iraqis to have a follow-on force that could be 20,000 or so troops. But he has not recently said that we should send 20,000 troops into Iraq right now. That is not the Romney position currently.
Okay, I'm going to take a moment's pause for the Twitter-thon, which I've done at every debate. As we know, Big Bird far and away trounced everything else in the first debate. Tonight, it was horses and bayonets running away when the president, citing Governor Romney's observation about the Navy in 1916, said, well, Governor, we also have fewer horses and bayonets than we did in 1916, although we are now told that the military still does have some bayonets out there. But let me go to Nicolle Wallace. A peacenik, Governor Romney tonight?
Look, I think that the Romney campaign gets a kick out of this notion that somehow Obama won on points. The Romney campaign is, if nothing else, they are stoic, they are disciplined, and they are insanely strategic. Their strategy may not have been to try to beat a sitting commander-in-chief in his commander-in-chiefness. How could they possibly do that? Their strategy was to talk to all 9 of the undecided voters left in Ohio and to bring it right back to the economy. And I don't know how anyone could argue that he didn't win in that objective.
Donna, is Matt Dowd right when he says it's not going to change the polling numbers a lot? What happened tonight?
You know, Matt is absolutely right that this thing is so close right now that it's a ground game. Both sides got to go after their base and try to shore them up and get them out to vote. But Barack Obama won tonight because he had a strategy to tell the country that this is a time to have a strong lead in the White House.
But Matt Dowd, the Romney strategy has been all along, and they have said all along, that if Mitt Romney crosses that threshold of being a credible commander-in-chief after the third debate, you're going to see what happened this year, exactly what happened in 1980, a flood to him at the end, all those undecided voters at the end. On the other hand, there may not be many undecided voters out there.
Yeah, well, I think the race that everybody should look at is not 1980, which is what is 2004, because there's many more similarities. In 1980, there was one debate that finally got agreed to. President Reagan was all set to take the lead. He showed he could be commander-in-chief, and as soon as that debate was over, the race was over. We've now had 3 debates. The time for that to have happened was at the first debate when Mitt Romney won and won big. Right now, we're in a situation just like 2004, where this race is going to be a 1-point or a 2-point race, all the way down, with a few states that are ultimately going to decide this race. And what you had is now a little extra juice from the president tonight on that commander-in-chief test that I think is going to give their Democratic base what they may need to turn out the votes they need to turn out. But at 1-point race, this is going to stay.
So, George Will, do you agree it's not going to change the polling numbers much?
I do. Tonight we saw 2 men who don't really disagree all that much, talking about subjects concerning which the voters don't care all that much. So I would sum this up with a nursery rhyme. The cow kicked Nellie in the belly in the barn, didn't do her any good, didn't do her any harm. Both men tonight were Nellies. So
Jake Tapper, David Muir, both men were Nellies. I'm sure both campaigns will disagree with that, but set us up now for these final 2 weeks. Coming out of this debate, what is each candidate's major goal over these next 2 weeks? Jake, you start.
Well, their goal is to go to these undecided voters in these few states and make their pitch, their economic pitch. The president has an unbelievably packed schedule. I am sorry to say, because I'll be with him for all of it, going from here in Florida to Ohio, Iowa, Colorado, Nevada, back to Florida, Virginia, Ohio again. And basically, you're going to see the president, and I'm sure Mitt Romney as well, just focusing on these states. They're going to start to fall away. For instance, I would be very surprised if we saw President Obama go to North Carolina more than once in the next 2 weeks. That seems to be a state that is falling into the Romney pile. But you're going to see the keenly focused eye of the president and his campaign go to where the votes are. Right now, they need to keep Ohio in their camp, and also, hopefully for them, in their view, Iowa or Colorado, and then they can hold on to an electoral victory.
And David, the focus of Mitt Romney?
Hey, George, that travel itinerary Jake just mentioned sounds an awful lot like mine because they're headed to the same states, Nevada, Colorado tomorrow, Iowa, Ohio later in the week. And those ABC News poll numbers that came out just today showing this a tied race. But when you look at the gender gap, George, you really see these numbers. Mitt Romney leading among men in this country and President Obama with a fairly hefty lead among women. And so expect Mitt Romney in these swing states in these final 2 weeks to try to court those women, those swing voters who really could decide this race on Election Day.
And a note for everyone who was asking about the pink bracelet the president had on. Yes, that was for breast cancer. But I just want to say to everyone, please get George Will's email address when you write about the comments he's made tonight. Write him directly, okay? Not us. I'm not distancing myself from you, George. I just want to make sure you get that email. A quick thought what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. Christiane.
The Arab Spring, I noticed a very different vision from both men. President Obama thinking that this is an opportunity that the United States can work with and have a historic, once in a couple of lifetimes event in the Islamic world. Mitt Romney saying that this is very, very frightening and tumultuous. And I think that's one thing Americans do care about.
I'm just going to say that's the last you'll hear about foreign policy in this campaign.
I think that is a pretty safe bet.
And as we conclude the debates 2012, we thank you so much for joining us for all of them. And we're here at abcnews.com always. And a full wrap-up of a special edition of Nightline tonight. Watch it.
It has been a year where debates have made a difference, starting with these primaries straight through to tonight. I'll see you first thing tomorrow on GMA.